Howdy, and welcome to the Petrus Development Show, where we discuss fundraising in the religious sector and how generosity and giving impacts both the organization and the donor. From campus ministries to high schools, from universities and faith-based nonprofits to Catholic parishes, we bring you stories, insights, and best practices that will inspire, educate, and inform you to go out and raise more money for your ministry and the kingdom. God bless, and thank you for joining us today.
Well, howdy everyone. Welcome to the Petrus Development Show. My name is Rhen from Petrus Development, and joining me today is not the big guy, not Andrew Robinson. He's out right now, so we brought in an even bigger gun here. We got Tara Doyon, also from Petrus Development, one of our senior consultants and our director of operations, and she's joining me today to talk a little bit about major gifts fundraising, going out meeting donors, how you do that, why you do that, who you go meet, and everything around that topic. So welcome, Tara.
Thank you, Rhen. I'm excited to be here with you today.
Excellent. If you're watching us on video, you may have a good sense of what day we're recording on. We got a new associate pastor at my church, and his Ash Wednesday game is very strong. I feel like I got a good cross on my forehead today.
Yeah, I haven't been to Mass yet, but both of my daughters have been, and my one daughter went at 7 a.m. She's on a college campus, and her whole forehead was smudged. And her confirmation sponsor is our pastor, and they're very close friends. And I know he did it very intentionally all over her forehead so she could enter the day with no doubt about what day it is, what faith she is, and how she feels about her religion. So I'm sure that was very, very purposeful for her particularly.
I always appreciate the big, strong cross rather than just the little smudge that people aren't sure whether that's just dirt that you got on your forehead or what's going on there. To make it obvious.
Yep, you have to be intentional about that.
Excellent. Well, we're going to talk about major gifts fundraising today. And I wanted to start with a little bit of a story of why major gifts fundraising I think is important to a fundraising program. And we'll talk more about what it is. I used to work for a campus ministry as the development director. And there was one time when myself and the director, our pastor, were traveling through a city, and we had an evening that suddenly was open. We had nothing on this calendar. And so it's like, oh, we should make use of this time. We're going through the city that we usually don't go through. And so I looked up all of our donors and supporters who lived in that region and called a bunch of them. And one couple said, oh, we're around. Why don't you come over for dinner? So we went and met them for dinner. And this is a couple that had been $100 a year donors forever. He was an alum from the early 70s. And so they've been giving for decades, $100 a year consistently. And we went and had dinner with them. Great dinner. It was a 4-hour long dinner. It was one of the longest ones I've ever sat in. And they had a great rapport. Everything was going great. And what we learned during that dinner is that this gentleman and his wife only lived in the U.S. a couple weeks of the year. They had a house in the U.S. and the rest of the year they lived overseas. And he was in charge of overseeing the building of nuclear reactors for a foreign government. And we said, we could probably ask this couple for more than $100 a year, and it probably wouldn't hurt their budget based on that information. And so we did, and they became $10,000 a year donors basically overnight and consistently for years and years. For every year that I was working there, they gave $10,000 every year, right? And that they had the capacity to do that for a long time, but they didn't do that before because they didn't know us. They didn't have a level of trust with us, the staff of the organization, and they didn't know, what would we do that with that money? Can we trust them to use it for good and to make an impact on the lives of students? And once they met us and built that relationship, it was a no-brainer for them to make that investment in the campus ministry. And that really is what Major Gifts Fundraising is all about, finding those people who want to support ministry like yours, building relationships, building trust, and then asking them for those bigger gifts. And that's what can change a ministry and change its impact overnight. Great. So Tara, you've worked in fundraising for a while. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience with fundraising and especially about major gifts? And we'll dive into the definitions of what major gift fundraising is here in a minute.
Yeah, thank you, Rhen. So I've worked for close to 25 years now. I think that's a lot, probably longer, in the nonprofit sector. in a variety of different venues and organizations. But it always comes down to having the financial stability to run your programs and keep your ministries going, whatever that looks like. And it comes down to those key supporters that are going to keep your ministry going. And over the years, I've just been so privileged to work with so many great people that have opened up their lives to me as well as their pocketbooks. And so I have great experience in working with people that are really, really generous from right from the get-go. I also have some horror stories about asking people for gifts that should not have been asking for major gifts. When you're young and you're eager to bring in money for your organization, you put it all out there, and I've learned the hard way that you have to build a relationship. I think if you've ever heard me talk about major gifts, the phrase I always say is you generally don't ask someone to marry you on the first date. I mean, every once in a while you hear those stories where it works out perfectly, but this is kind of general rule of thumb. You don't really put it out there that first time on that first date, especially if it's a blind date.
Makes sense.
So I feel like a pretty breadth of knowledge of things that work, things that don't work, and probably all the little intricacies in between of how I got to the point of relationships really working and feeling comfortable about making major gift asks and knowing that's a real stable part of your fundraising development plan.
Excellent. So we mentioned that major gifts fundraising is going out asking people for gifts, sitting down with them face to face. Can you talk a little bit more about what is major gifts fundraising, and especially what is a major gift?
Absolutely. So one of the first questions I am always asked within an organizational structure that we're working with when we work with a client is what do you consider a major gift? And I always have to laugh because my answer for your organization is going to be a different answer than another organization. And this is the standard. A major gift is a large gift, generally a cash gift, but it can become a bequest or a planned gift or, a stock gift of extraordinary value that's not typical for your organization. So for a university, a $10,000 gift is going to be chump change. Like they get $10,000 gifts every day. They get them from multiple people across multiple sectors. So university would say a major gift is not $10,000. But for some of these small organizations, sometimes their larger gifts are $500 gifts, $1,000 gifts. So a $10,000 gift is a huge major gift for that organization. So you really have to look at your organizational standards. What's your average gift amount? What is your threshold? And I don't think it's vitally important to say, okay, $10,000 or above is going to be a major gift. But when you are creating gift acceptance policies and good stewardship policies, you want to have an idea what you think is a large gift, because that way you can make sure you appreciate that gift appropriately and bring in the appropriate people from your staff to appreciate and steward that gift. So you don't necessarily have to have a set number, but I think you need to look at your average gift numbers and see what are some of those larger peaks. I think it's also really important for organizations, especially a smaller organization that's just starting their fundraising journey, to know that you're going to have to evaluate this pretty frequently. Every 6 months, look at our gift averages. Are we seeing gift standards go up higher? We all know that the more that you get out in front of people and you talk to people and you ask for gifts, the more gifts you're going to bring in. So those averages are going to be skewed by those higher numbers. So it's really important to know that every 6 months within the first couple of years of getting started, you need to probably reevaluate what those numbers look like. And then once you're a really mature program, at least every 9 to 12 months, you need to look at those standards as well, because you will see peaks and valleys, but you will see changes of what you consider a major gift.
Exactly. And yeah, it does change over time, right? I remember when I first started fundraising, I was the first fundraiser at the organization, and I got my first pledge of $1,000 gift over $4,000 per year for several years. And we were so excited because that was we had never gotten gifts of that size, right? And by the time I left that organization 7 years later, $1,000 gifts were relatively commonplace. We would get them, several of them in response to every newsletter, right? And then we were looking at 5, even 6-figure gifts that would be considered major gifts. I can think of one of our coworkers used to work for a medical school. And the smallest gift he was allowed to ask for, I think, was $25,000, right? So that was kind of their starter level of gift. And so there's just different standards between different organizations. So, and part of it's just how much trust have you built up between yourself and that donor, right? The more trust there is, the more willing they're going to be to make gifts. And the major gifts are going to need some more intentional trust building, which is going out, meeting them face to face, building those relationships. So one question that I got asked by some of our parishioners when I started fundraising for the campus ministry was, why go out and ask people for gifts? If people like what we're doing, they like what the ministry is accomplishing, they're going to give anyway, right? What would you say to somebody who thinks that in particular?
So that's very common, because if you put yourself in those sort of situational shoes, like if you like something, you're going to purchase it. If you like a song, you're going to download it and listen to it. If you like a favorite restaurant, you're going to go to that often. So you think that applies to fundraising and money as well, but that's really not the case. We all like electricity in our house, but we generally aren't prepaying our electric bill. We're waiting till that bill comes. We're waiting for them to ask us for that money. And we're generally not paying more than our bill comes to. You know, we have a $50 electric bill. We're paying $50. We're not paying 65 just because we're really appreciative of the electric company. And the same goes with fundraising. The number one reason why people do not make gifts, financial gifts, is because they're not asked. And we hear it over and over, and that sounds so simple, but that is the truth. And when we look at organizations that have a really good financial structure and have received most of those financial pieces through large gifts, it's because they've had a development program in place for years. They've been out asking people, they've been out telling the story in front of people for years and years and years. And that just shows you have to be in front of people. You have to ask people for the gift for them to know that it is something that you need. I have worked with so many Catholics over the years, and actually just not even Catholics, just Christians. But there is this perception that the church, the larger church, the big C church, has all this money. Yes, we have so much money in assets, I guess. We have a lot of assets. But we're not a rich organization per se. We run pretty independently, and a lot of people don't understand the structure of the church, that each organization, whether it be a church, a school, or a separate organization ministry, generally they're pretty financially independent from any large structure. And they have to survive, and they have bills, and they have employees to pay. And so people sometimes forget to separate the logistics of that out. So they think, oh, the church has all this money, or this Catholic school, because they're Catholic, they're going to have tons of money because they belong to a really bougie church in the suburbs. Or, this organization has like a Boys and Girls Club. Like, oh, the Boys and Girls Club nationally is so well known, they must have tons of money. But every organization, usually it's its own LLC, its own chapter, and so the finances are independent. So unless you really get out in front of people and are really truthful in sharing the financial structure of your organization, people put a lot of assumptions upon you. And so that's why it's just vitally important to have those conversations and talk to people about asking for money.
Exactly. And that face-to-face ask, it's scary, it's terrifying, it's hard, but it is really vital, right? A parish that I used to do some work with, they had one pastor who kind of started their fundraising program, and he only did direct mail. So he sent out appeals, built up a database over 10, 12 years, and built up the annual fund to, it was tens of thousands. It was probably $60,000, $70,000 a year. The next priest came in and replaced him and hated writing. So he refused to do any newsletters, any appeal letters, anything. But he built relationships with a couple of major donors, and the annual fund was actually up under that priest, up to roughly $100,000 a year, give or take, up versus the priest that just sent the newsletters. But then the next priest, the third priest, came in and combined both those things. They started sending out regular communications, newsletters, appeal letters, and intentionally building relationships with donors. And within a few years, the annual fund was up to $400,000, right? So each of both those components, the communications piece, the annual fund, but also the major gifts, going up, asking people for money. When you put them together, they're very powerful, and they can really change an organization really fast when you kind of do a concerted effort on both of those pieces. But the personal face-to-face asks are where the big 5, 6, 7-figure gifts come from.
Yeah, absolutely. I was preparing for our call today, and I was looking at some statistics, and I came across the statistic, and I'm not quoting it because I know I have the numbers wrong, but it was like 84% of males respond to direct mail pieces. That's how they like to get their information. That's how they process their information. Women respond, it was like 77% of women respond to social media pieces, presumably because there's pictures, there's video, there's dialogue, kind of that tug on your heartstring in action. But 97% of people respond to in-person asks. And so that just shows you, no matter what your segments look like, everyone appreciates that face-to-face conversation. You can have that real transparent number, if you have the mail there, or that person who really wants those hard numbers, you can share that information. But then you also have the ability to have those, heart melting stories and dialogue and opportunity to share how those gifts are really changing lives in the organization you're working with. And it's hard to convey both of those messages in just one media source. So by having that face-to-face conversation, getting the organizational information out there in front of people, you're able to share that message very differently, but you're also able to glean so much more from the donor. So I think every time we get in front of someone, it's just a gem opportunity, because yes, you're getting the opportunity to share that organizational message or be able to have a deepened relationship with the donor, but you're really wanting to collect more information about a donor too. I know I did a workshop many years ago at a conference, and it was about donor cultivation, I think, maybe. And I went to one of my donors' houses, and it was when I was still working in development, and I took pictures of her like living room and desk, and I put it up on the screen as part of my presentation. And I asked people to like just look at her living room, and what sort of information are you going to pick up? And so, things like diplomas, if they had a lot of pictures, like I think she had a devotion, a Marian devotion. So she had like statuary and pictures. So those tell a story that someone, if you're going to have statues of the Virgin Mary in your house or pictures of her on your wall, you're a religious person. You're called to that aspect of spirituality. If you have pictures of all your vacations, like that's an adventurous person and they like to travel. All these sort of pieces that you can find out about someone that they're not going to tell you. I mean, I'm not going to sit down with you and be like, hey, I'm Tara, and I spent 283 nights in a hotel last year, and I went on 97 flights, even though that's what happened last year and it's crazy. But I'm not going to sit down and tell you that. But if you sat down, I don't have these pictures all in my house, but like, let's say you sat down at my house and you could see, all these amazing places that I visited in the last year. Those are conversation starters. Those are opportunities to get to know that donor a little more, intimately. Those are things that you want to make sure you capture and chart on their donor profile, so you can have that for the next time you have a conversation. And you're never going to pick those things up by just having a phone call with someone or, an email, text back and forth.
You know the verse from chapter 14 of the Gospel of Luke that says, "For which of you, desiring to build a tower, does not first sit down and count the cost, whether he has enough to complete it?"
If your organization is contemplating a capital campaign to raise money for any type of project, it is essential that you carry out a feasibility study by a neutral third party first. A feasibility study determines the level of interest your donors have in the project, the potential level at which they might provide financial support, and who might serve as volunteer leaders of the effort. The feasibility study process will also help to excite your prospects about the potential of a campaign. If your organization needs to carry out a feasibility study, Petrus can help. To learn more about what's involved, check out petrusdevelopment.com/study. petrusdevelopment.com/study.
So let's dig a little more into the nuts and bolts of Major Gifts fundraising. I'll be going out meeting people face to face, asking for gifts, and we probably should start with the donor cycle. Can you tell us what the donor cycle is?
So the donor cycle is an opportunity to invite someone into financially giving to your organization. And the first step in a cycle, and so if you, we probably have a graphic that we can put up at some time, but it is a cycle. It's like, the little arrows, one arrow goes to one arrow and one arrow goes to the next. It's cyclical, never ending. But the first step is someone making that first gift. They're going to make that one-time gift, that initial gift. And that is usually a gift from an appeal or an unsolicited gift or a crowdfunding opportunity or just, that one-time gift that they make to your organization. That second part of that donor cycle is having them repeat that gift. So either at that same financial level or at an increased level. That third part of that cycle is that repetitive gift that they're giving regularly. Maybe that's part of a monthly giving program. Maybe it's because you've stewarded that relationship and you know that they're going to give 3 times every year based on their tax cycle or whatever that looks like in their philanthropic priorities, but it's regular giving. And then increased regular giving. And then that fourth piece is that major gift piece. And that could be a regular gift, a one-time gift. It could be a repetitive gift. It also could be a legacy gift, so like a planned gift. So we really look at that fourth piece as that major gift piece. But again, because it's part of a cycle, we're constantly asking them to repeat that again, and we're constantly stewarding that gift again. Where I see organizations struggle is ones that have great giving history and people that are giving all the time, but they're not bringing new people into that cycle. We know that the largest transfer of wealth in the entire world is going to happen in the next 10 to 20 years when the baby boomer population dies. So we know this population of people, they're the most generous of givers right now. They are going to be dying. So we are going to be losing a huge chunk of that regular income. Hopefully we're stewarding them to make legacy gifts and bequests, but we know if for whatever happens, that population is dying and essentially their wealth is going elsewhere. If we are not constantly bringing new people into that giving cycle, asking them for that first gift and stewarding that gift and shepherding them along that cycle will end. It's not going to be perpetual. It's not going to be never ending. So we constantly have to be worrying about how we're going to bring and invite new people into the cycle so we can continue to keep it going.
So there is kind of a progression when it comes to the donor's relationship with the organization, that they're and the level of their giving, right? What does that typical progression look like of a relationship of that relationship with the donor and the organization, from when they first start giving up until maybe you ask them for a major gift and beyond? How does that progression usually take place?
So it happens differently for every organization and every individual. One of the most standard practices, or actually not practice, one of the standard philosophies about donor engagement is the LIA principle. It's a very, very common principle. I actually just had someone reach out to me a couple weeks ago who had been working in philanthropy for a while, but now she works for a community foundation, but had to do a stewardship talk. And she said, I just need to talk to you because I haven't been doing regular donor stewardship or regular donor giving for so long. all I know is like LIA and donor cycle. And I'm like, yeah, that's all you know. That's all you need to know. It hasn't changed. So the LIA principle is the principle that applies to donors. We know the best donor is connected at 3 points. They're connected because they're linked to your organization, they have an interest to your organization, and they have the financial ability to make a gift. So someone that is connected at 3 points is a great prospect for a major donor. Where we see most organizations struggle are donors that are connected at 2 levels. You know, maybe someone comes to mass regularly and they have a lot of money, but they're not engaged at a higher level. Or they have a lot of money, they may really be interested because they're Catholic or they're a religious person, but they're not coming to mass regularly. So we see all sorts of scenarios of how this plays out, but until people are connected at 3 levels, you're not going to have a really solid major donor. And so when I'm working with clients, one of the things that I have them do is pull their list of their major donor prospects, and I have them physically create a worksheet for every single one of those donor prospects that says LIA down the side of it. And I have them write out. I'm old, so they're still writing out things for me, because I still believe that when you physically put your pen to the paper, there's there's studies that show that it helps really put it to memory. But I have them physically write out, here are the 3 levels of how this person's engaged, because then you can see where those holes are. And so then my next mission for them or idea for them is, okay, they're making gifts. We know that they have the capacity to make larger gifts. It is your job, it is your duty, it's your task in this next year to make connections at 3 levels. You've identified where they're not connected. Now your job is to steward that relationship to make those connections at all 3 levels. And when they start making those connections, when they start engaging those donors to understand where those connections are and to solidifying those connections, it just unfolds really lovely that suddenly you have someone who's super engaged, who knows your organization, they believe in the mission of your organization, and now they're ready to say, okay, how can I help you within your desires and needs for the organization? What do you need from me? And so we really have to start looking at those connection points. Where are they connected? Where are they not connected? And how can we improve those connections?
Is that something you typically know before you contact the donor? Is that something you kind of try to ascertain in the process of meeting with them and then work on?
So a little of both. I think if you say, I'm only going to talk to people until I know all these connections, then you're not going to talk to anyone. Or if you try to do all this legwork and never, or you make all the calls but don't do the legwork, you're not going to get really far either. So you have to really gauge yourself, and you have to put effort into both areas. I always say we consistently are paralyzed by perfection in this industry. We believe in our organizations. We want to come across as polished and scripted, and we want to be professional, and we want things to be perfect. But life isn't perfect, and life will never be perfect, and our organizations are never going to be perfect. And so if we wait for all of those things to consistently be in perfect alignment, then we're just not going to do anything. We're just going to keep, mushing things around in the sand. So you have to be professional. You have to do your due diligence to understand donors' perspectives, to understand who they are. But if you consistently say, I'm going to wait till things are like this, or I'm going to wait till I know all the information, you're going to be sitting around waiting forever. So, do some intentional planning, do your due diligence, and have a plan and act on it. And consistently, evaluate what you're doing and how you can do things better. But we have to get out there in front of people and ask as well.
Great. So when you have a list of donors and they're that linkage, interest, and ability, it's easy to decide who to go meet. If you don't have that information, or maybe you're new to the organization, or you're just starting fundraising and you don't have a good idea of who your donors are, how do you decide who you should call and ask to meet with you face to face?
So there are a couple of easy answers. The first one is, let's say you're an organization that you've never even asked for gifts before. You have no data. No one's ever made a gift. Start with the people you know. And if you don't know anyone, ask other people in your organization who they know. But if that all fails, start with the letter A in the alphabet. You know, alphabetize your spreadsheet, start somewhere, just pick a place. Again, like if we constant, you're like, well, I don't know the right people, so I need to ask a little more about other people. I need to dig around a little more. You're going to be digging and digging and digging and never asking. So just pick somewhere. But generally, if you're any sort of organization, you know people. If you're a church, you know people that are going to be coming regularly. If you're an organization, you start with your volunteers. Your volunteers are your most committed people to your organization. They're generally giving. They're usually the ones that are giving the most generously. Start with them. Start with an easy win. Start with someone that you feel comfortable with. When we do a large capital campaign, there is a reason before we take the campaign public to everyone in the community. There's a reason we start by asking the staff and the board members of an organization for a gift before we go public. There is a reason why we take our top donors to every organization and ask for those foundational gifts before we go public in a campaign. It's because these people know us, they trust us. You can be humble with them. You can come to them and say, you know, Rhen, I know you've been part of our organization, you've been volunteering, you know that we're just getting started with fundraising. Now more than ever, I need your support, and I would like to ask you to financially support us in this new endeavor. And do you know anyone else that I can talk to? So like, you have to have those conversations. So start with the people that are most connected, your volunteers, your board members, your staff members. Start with easy wins, build your confidence. Know that you don't have to be polished, and you know, you can confront that white elephant in the room. Hey, it's my first time, I'm really nervous about this, but I know you love this organization, and I thought you would be the perfect person for me to come talk to before I go out and talk to new people and bring new people into the organization. And ask for feedback. I mean, that's the perfect opportunity. People love to give advice. And so there's nothing better when you can go into an organizational meeting with someone or donor meeting with someone and ask them for a gift, but then also ask them for advice. That just like cements them to you even more.
Definitely true. I 100% agree. And the one thing I caution people when they're starting to go up meet people and to ask them for meetings is to not overthink it. When I first started out, I made spreadsheets with, like 6 different factors on there that I tried to figure out for each prospect, like, okay, how likely are they to meet with me based on this X, Y, and Z, right? And what I found over time is that it just doesn't necessarily matter. You don't find the $100 a year donors to become $10,000 a year donors from a process like that. You just go out and meet people, as many people as you can, build some relationships. Some of those meetings are going to be waste of time, for lack of a better word. They're going to be people who aren't that interested in your ministry, but others are going to be kind of diamonds on the rough, where you wouldn't think this person for whatever reason would be a good fit to become a big donor, and they do. You just got to go meet them and build those relationships.
Absolutely. And I think one anomaly in religious fundraising, especially secular organizations, not so much, but religious fundraising has a really interesting dynamic. You have very, very wealthy people that live very humbly, that don't give publicly. And so if you were to do any sort of Google search on them or wealth screening on them, their numbers are going to come back pretty low. And that's just standard across the board with religious people that are pretty devout and that give religiously. They're not going to be those people. You're not necessarily going to the fanciest house in the neighborhood, or going to the house that has a Porsche Lamborghini in the driveway. You're pulling up to homes that are pretty middle demographic. They're driving the Hondas, the Toyotas that are 10 years old. There's a reason why they have money. There's a really great book I like, The Millionaire Next Door. And it's a great just narrative about how we can't put presumptions on people or assume that they don't have money or they're not generous because of what we presume to be their wealth. And in religious fundraising, particularly, this plays out over and over again. So we have to, and the only reason, the way that we're going to know these sort of things then is to get out and to talk to people and develop these relationships, because no wealth screen is going to give us good information. They've probably given very generously across many religious sectors, but because religious groups typically don't put lists out of their top donors, no public persona is going to pick that up. No Google search is going to find that. And the only way to really uncover that is to develop these relationships with people.
Exactly. I had a donor who's giving $90,000 a year, every year. And I ran him through a wealth screening service once just to see what he came back as. And the suggested ask amount for this gentleman was $5,000 pledge over 5 years. Right. So none of his data
Yeah.
showed up in these publicly available databases, but the opposite can be true as well. Right. You don't have to listen to too many hours of the Dave Ramsey show to hear of people who are living a pretty fancy looking lifestyle that you might be like, oh, I need to go ask them for a big gift, but they're $300,000 in debt.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So you just got to go
Absolutely.
meet these people and find out, what they're like. Are they interested in your ministry, and build that relationship. So we've been talking about going out meeting people face to face. How do we even get these meetings in the first place?
So you have to have a plan. You definitely want to have an operational plan. You don't have to micromanage it or analyze it to the nth degree, but you want to have a plan. So you have your top donors, and you have to have their good contact information, and you need to then decide how you're going to do this. One of the things I like to say within a healthy development, a very mature development office, you should be having at least 20 meetings with people a month. You're going to have a lot of calls to get those meetings. So 80 phone calls, 40 good conversations, 20 meetings a month. And that's really, really important that you get those calls in. And sometimes we shy away from that because it's hard. No one likes to pick up the phone and do it. And so one of the things that I really coach my new development officers to do is to actually print out a spreadsheet. So just a simple spreadsheet that has, the 80, the 40, the 20, and I have them print it out and lay it on their desk. And every Monday morning, they print that new spreadsheet out, and then they have it there. And if we have it on our computer, we're going to minimize that screen and we're not going to open it. We're just going to overlook it. But if it's on our desk, physically on our desk every Monday morning, we know that it's there. It's going to stare at us. It's going to remind us. And so, I would say, time block your time every Monday. What I generally say is, come in every Monday morning from 9 to 10. You're going to check your emails and listen to your voicemails. And you're going to answer anything that needs to happen like right away. But then from 10 to noon, before you even go to lunch on your Monday morning, I want you to plan out your calls. Who are your calls that you're going to be making this week? I want you to break it down by month, but you're going to have every week, here are the people that I know I'm going to call, and be prepared. There are things that you can do to prepare yourself for that call. You need to have a script. Once you've been doing it for a while, you're going to go off script. It's going to come natural. But until you're really comfortable with that, you need to have a script. And you need to have a couple different versions of the script. You need to have the script version of leaving a voicemail. You need to have the script version of someone who, absolutely, I'm ready to meet with you. You need to have the script version of, it sounds really good, but I'm really busy right now. Call me in a couple weeks. And you need to have those scripted out and prepared to go at any time. We live in a world where people generally don't pick up their phones. And I don't know how many times I've gotten caught off guard because I'm assuming that I'm going to be leaving a voicemail and someone answers and I'm like, oh, hi, I didn't expect anyone to answer. And that doesn't make sense. I'm calling them. Why wouldn't they answer? So you be prepared for those things, but practice more than anything. Practice. Record yourself, talk to yourself in the phone, in the mirror, have a conversation with your dog, your spouse, your kid, whomever that looks like, but practice. When it flows off of your tongue really easily, it's going to be much easier when you're caught off guard. It's going to be natural. It's going to be part of your regular conversation. It's not going to seem scripted. So just have a script out, but practice it and go over and over, but start with easy wins too. So if you flub up your words and you're talking to someone who you know and you're comfortable with, they're not going to think of it, a thing of it. So, start easy, go for the easy wins, but have a plan and have a script.
And if you don't have a script to go off of, we actually have some samples of scripts of these phone scripts for calling and making asks to get a face-to-face meeting available for free for download. If you go to petrusdevelopment.com/138. This is episode 138 of the Petrus Development Show. So go to petrusdevelopment.com/138 and you'll be able to download those sample scripts for free. And I think one of the key points there is to always leave a message, especially the first time you call somebody. That was something that I was told early on, and I think it's true. If you don't leave a message, whoever you're calling is going to assume you're a robocall, right? And they're never going to answer again. But if you leave a message, then they know who you are, they know why you're calling. And what I like to always say is keep the ball in your court and let them know, hey, this is Rhen from this ministry, and I'd love to meet with you sometime. I'll call you back tomorrow afternoon, see if we can reconnect then, or if we can connect then. And then they know the next day, the next afternoon when their phone rings, like, oh, I recognize that number. That's who it must be. And maybe they're going to ignore you, but maybe they're going to pick up, right? And so it keeps the ball in your court a little bit and lets you move forward. If you don't, and if you don't have a phone number for the person, in my experience, you just work your way down what are the next best contact methods you can find for them. Can you find an email? It's usually not as effective as a phone number, but you can still get meetings. I've actually had good luck with LinkedIn more so than other social media networks, connecting with people and getting meetings with them. I've even handwritten letters to people, mailed it to them and said, hey, I would love to meet with you. Don't have a way to get in contact with you. Can we meet sometime? Here's where to contact me. And I've had a handful of people respond to that. So try anything and everything you can to get those meetings and see where they go.
Yeah, absolutely. I always say too, just exactly you said, don't ever leave it up to them to call you because they won't. But let them know, like when you let them know I'm calling you back, it signals to them, oh, they're going to keep calling until I answer and either meet with them or tell them to take me off the list. So I think that's really important that we do set it up that way. Another thing I always say about calls are make sure you document when you're calling them, especially people like retirees. If you're calling every Monday and they're never answering on Monday morning, maybe they go to an exercise class every Monday morning. So I always say then call like Tuesday afternoon, because like if you look at schedules, and probably this is from my recreation background, I worked for the YMCA for years. If you have a class, it's usually like Monday, Wednesday, or Tuesday, Thursday. So you want to try the opposite times. So if it's a Monday morning and they're not answering ever, call them on Tuesday or Thursday afternoon, or vice versa. So it's important to just vary up that time, because again, especially if you're a retiree, you may have a standing club, a meeting, a group that you always go to. And so it's really important that you can try to vary that. I did have an organization that I work with, or that I had worked with, who they stopped working at 5 o'clock every day. They stopped work at 5 o'clock every day. And the development director was really protective of his time at home. And so he would never make phone calls at home in the evening. And, I admire those boundaries. I've been a working mom. I have a family. I admire those boundaries and I respect them. But at the end of the day, this work that we're doing is not a 9 to 5 work. And so I think you have to go into this also knowing there are going to be times that I'm probably going to have to work in the evenings, or there are going to be times that I have to work on the weekends. And I'm not saying that you have to give every weekend up or every evening up, but maybe there is one night a week that, especially if you have kids, you tell your spouse, I need to have an hour and a half or 2 hours to make phone calls. And this evening, I'm going to come home earlier in the day, whatever you can do to make it work. But I think we don't want to ever get stuck in a position where I'm not going to do anything after 5 o'clock, because a lot of the people that you're going to be calling again, they may work, they may not be able to take calls during the day, or they're not going to have a meaningful conversation. So I think you have to be willing to say, okay, I'm going to call on a Saturday morning or a Sunday afternoon. I think Sunday, there's going to be a lot of people that say, oh, don't ever call someone on a Sunday afternoon. But what better time for them to get a call after they've come home from mass, presumably, and heard a great homily about stewardship and how they should be involved in their faith, is to get a call, and they're feeling charitable. It's like there's a reason why giving goes up during Lent and during Advent. People feel charitable during those times. They've presumably been going to mass and doing all these things that we want them to do. And so, it's not a bad thing to make some calls on off times.
Exactly. And some number of those meetings you actually get face to face are going to be in the evenings, they're going to be early mornings, they're going to be all odd hours of the day, right? Before we move on to that, I wanted to mention one other thing. A lot of the most successful and longest tenured fundraisers I know make a habit of a quote unquote power hour of phone calls every day. They batch their calls and they put it on their calendar, and it's going to be this hour every single day. I'm going to call people until that hour runs out, right? And I think there's a lot of wisdom in that. I think even experienced fundraisers that have been around, when they start making phone calls, that first call is always a, oh, okay, here I go. All right. You have to get yourself kind of psyched up a little bit. And once they get in the flow of it, it's not as hard. But that first call always takes a little more effort. And so if you can batch them and get past that first call, then you're good to go for a bunch of calls. All right. So you call somebody, they answer, they say, hey, I'd love to meet. Sometimes they're going to say, hey, come to my house, come to my office, or I want to meet you here. Other times, maybe a frustrating number of times, they're like, I don't know, where do you want to meet? When that happens and they won't really give you an idea of where they would like to meet, where are there places that you would say are good to meet them? And are there places you would say are bad to meet with them, to go sit down for half an hour face to face?
Yeah, so before I ever make a call to someone, I try to look at a couple geographical things. Where do they live and where is their office? So if it's a retiree or someone who's not working, I try to scout out some areas in their like geographic area of their home. If it's someone who's working, I look at their office. I think very common, everyone's like, oh, let's meet at a Starbucks. But if you've ever been to a Starbucks, I don't know, around like almost all of our Starbucks around where I live are crazy busy. Like they've remodeled them, they don't have as much indoor space, and it's very, very loud. And so, yes, coffee is a great place to meet someone, but certain chains or certain places just don't lend to good conversation. So, even if you have to like make a drive to that area and scout out a couple places, if it's near you, look for those places that allow better conversations to happen. Someplace where you can have a little more intimate room space. And that really lends itself to those good conversations. And so it's going to be important that it's, someplace accessible, easy parking. So scout those areas out. Always, yeah, offer it up to them. Like, is there a place that you're more comfortable with? And if they say no, say, well, I was thinking about, and then oftentimes, especially if you're not that familiar, if it's not in your geographic area, if you throw out a couple places, even if they don't like that, it'll get their brains thinking like, oh yeah, actually right next to that place is this great coffee place or bakery, let's go there. So usually, people will, if they have strong opinions, they're going to tell you right away. But even if they don't, like if you can throw some suggestions out, if they don't like those, they're going to usually like get them thinking about, oh, here's a good place to meet, or here we can go. So just always have a few different places in mind. I would say there's, again, and you ask kind of like what's not appropriate. I would say there's probably no place that's not appropriate. If someone's comfortable meeting you, then, any place is probably fine. Ideally, it's always best to get to their home or get to their office. That's gold standard. But if you can't, any other place is probably going to work out.
The one thing I tried to always avoid is places with TVs, because you don't want to be kind of presenting
Yeah.
your mission, talking about something, and they're staring at Sports Center, which has happened to me, right? But other than that, I've met people I've gone fishing with them. That was our donor meeting of different things. I've heard a lot of our Texas friends talk about going to cattle auctions. So you might find yourself in some very interesting places when you go to meet a donor.
Yeah, I've been to a rodeo. I've been to like walking on a golf course. I didn't play golf, but they invited me to walk the golf course with them. That was in Montana. Trying to think where else. I've had some interesting places too. My favorite place was an NFL football headquarters.
Wow.
Yeah, that was real exciting. That was really, and I'm not necessarily a sports buff, but even I thought that was really, really exciting. And my friends and family that are sports buffs, they were super, super jealous and probably mad that I didn't appreciate but it was still pretty cool to go to an NFL team headquarters. And
Excellent.
it wasn't our Super Bowl champs, but you know.
So one question that comes up when you think about these meetings, meeting somebody for coffee, for lunch, is who pays for the meal? How do you approach that conversation? What would you say to that?
So I always go in prepared to pay. If it's someone that you know that you absolutely want to pay for, you need to go to your location ahead of time and let that server know, or let the barista know, or however, whatever that scenario looks like. You know, I'm coming in, I'm going to pay for it. Here is my card, start a tab, whatever you need to do, you do that ahead of time. If it's someone that you're casual with, or in a more casual setting, you know, oh, you know, thank you for joining me today. I'd love to treat you to lunch, those sort of scenarios, but also be prepared for them to say, no, let me get this for you. And at that point, you need to be gracious. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Because oftentimes donors, you know, they recognize you coming out from your nonprofit, your organization, and you know that they know that you are there to ask them for money. So why would they make you spend money on them? And so they really want to take care of it. And so you don't want to argue with them. And the polite thing is obviously for us to offer to pay for them. But if they insist, just be gracious and say thank you, and let them do that.
Yeah, that's great. I always offered to pay, but I found the same thing. Well over half the time, they would insist on paying for both of us. Most of the rest of the time, they'd say, "Oh no, I'll get my own. Don't worry about it." And maybe 10% of the time, they would say, "Oh, thank you so much for paying for mine." What I
Yeah.
did learn, depending where you are, I always brought cash with me, because I ended up at a few different restaurants that I didn't expect it, but they wouldn't take a credit card, which I didn't know existed anymore. And I was suddenly like, "Oh my goodness, what do I do now?" The two times that happened to me, the donor like insisted on paying, so that was great. But I was like, man, I don't know what I would have done, because I didn't have any cash and I wasn't prepared for it. So
Yeah,
just in
I
case.
haven't had that one, but that's good. Now, I kind of also just a general etiquette, and I don't want to presume that everyone knows this. Um, but when you are going out to dinner with someone, and especially if you think that they might pay, you never order the most expensive thing on the menu. I mean, this is kind of a
Right.
rule of thumb. I don't think we talk about it enough. You know, kids aren't going to cotillion and etiquette classes like they used to. And maybe you grew up in a family that never went out to eat. So I think it needs to be said. And I don't think it's, you know, it's not, don't be ashamed if you didn't know this, but always go for like the mid-price meal. Now, if the person that you're with is ordering the steak and says, "Hey, you know, the steak and lobster combo is fantastic. You must get it." Then they're inviting you to do that, and so you're acceptable. But don't go for the lobster, don't go for the fillet, you know, right away. That's just really rude. And I just don't think people know that today. And I've picked that up just with my children and their friends over the years. People don't know that. Same with alcohol. I generally say, if you want to have one glass of alcohol, if it's dinner or something like that, a cocktail, and the person that you're with orders one, or says, "Oh, this wine is fantastic, it pairs lovely with the meal, you should try it," that is your invitation to have one, and one only. But generally, just stay away from it. It's never generally a good idea. It's always, you know, we always laugh in the Catholic world. If you ever go to a Catholic school gala of some sort, that all the money is spent after drinks have been had. It's generally never a good idea to mix finances and alcohol. So just, you know, keep it classy. Have one drink if you're invited or the scenario lends itself. But other than that, you know, stick with some iced tea or water.
So we got the meeting. What typically happens in these meetings? How would you approach them? And I know there's a few different types of meetings, right? We should probably mention that. There's
Mhm.
discovery meetings, cultivation meetings, solicitation meetings, and stewardship meetings. Just real quickly, how would you approach a typical meeting, and how is that different between the different types of those meetings?
Yeah, so I think it's really clear to be upfront what sort of meeting that you are having with someone. Let's say you and I were meeting for lunch and it was a cultivation meeting, but but you know that I work in development. You know that I'm eventually going to ask you for a financial gift. I think it's really okay to say, Rhen, thank you so much for meeting with me today. I'm going to let you off easy. I'm not going to ask you for any money today, but I do want to talk to you about X, Y, and Z, or I'd love to get your opinion on this project. I think that kind of, you've confronted the elephant in the room right away. You don't have to dance around any awkwardness of the conversation. And half the time those meetings end up with, I know you said you weren't going to ask me for any money today, but I really love what you're doing. Can I send you home with a little something? That inevitably happens, especially if you have really good rapport with people. So, with the cultivation meeting, I think you can do that. With an ask meeting, obviously we want to confront that kind of elephant in the room too, but we want to be polite. We want to have good conversation. Rhen, thank you so much for meeting me today. I know you've been very invested in our ministry, and so this lunch gives us a really great opportunity to talk about some of these great things, and then I'll share a little bit more how I think you can become involved. So that kind of sets the tone that get ready, order that filet, because I'm going to be asking you for this gift, but I really want to share with you what's happening and get your perspective on things before I'm going to ask you for that gift. It's really important to, I think, just put your intentions out there. Again, it sets the stage. It allows people to relax one way or the other, because you've stated the obvious right away.
And I probably should have clarified, for those who don't know, a discovery meeting is usually a first meeting. It's getting to know each other, right? Usually you're not making an ask. It's just kind of establishing the relationship. Cultivation is building the relationship, and working toward making an ask. Solicitation meeting is making the ask, and then a stewardship meeting is after they've made the gift, following up and just saying thank you so much. This is how we're using your gift, and just maintaining that relationship. And then it kind of comes back around to cultivation for the next ask somewhere down the road.
And eventually you develop a relationship and a rapport with these especially major donors that they like to go out for coffee. They like meals. They don't want to be bothered by any of that stuff. They just want to have a phone call. They want to get an email update every so often. The whole idea of cultivation and good stewardship is that you get to know every individual, and you understand their preferences of information gathering, of sharing information that may be of interest to them, inviting them in. You're going to get to know these sort of preferences. And so you're going to be able to really tailor every opportunity encounter to specific to them.
Definitely, yeah. That first meeting, that discovery meeting, it is really feeling it out, right? It's you come in, maybe it's a little bit of small talk, and it's a lot of times I like to go into those with a list of questions, like kind of a survey. Hey, I'm trying to get to know our supporters, and you might ask them a bunch of questions. Why do you support us? Or how'd you
become involved?
Exactly. And then you're getting to know them, and going that cultivation meeting. Sometimes you almost have to look for a reason to go back. A lot of times I do the discovery meeting myself, and then say, "Oh, you should meet our pastor, Father Ben. Could I come back a second time and you can meet him?" Right? And then subsequent meetings, you kind of get to know the person and know what do they enjoy, and then it does become more of that flow, like you said, of just maintaining that relationship until you get to the ask.
And do your homework before. Google them. You will not believe the amount of information that's found on Google, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. Ask people within your organization. Find out tidbits of information on these people, and use that as just, starting point of, oh, I saw you were in the newspaper last week in that golf tournament. How long have you been playing golf? Or where's your favorite course to play? Or I don't know, whatever what that looks like. But find out those information pieces that you can glean from just public searches, and have that in your arsenal and ready to share or use that as just back and forth information to break the ice.
Great. And the only way to get really good at these meetings is to go do them, unfortunately, right? It's a little bit of trial and error, figuring out your kind of style and how you present your vision of your organization, and it'll get easier over time.
Yeah, it's really intimidating to pick up call people for the first time. One of the exercises I do with a lot of my younger clients. So I'm almost 50. Like, the phone has been my lifeline since as long as I can remember. I mean, I had a rotary phone at home, but I can remember when I was in an 8th grade and I was allowed to have my own phone in my room. I mean, that was like the best thing in the world. I was the kid that, and I'm sure this is really shocking if you know me, that would spend hours and hours with my friends on the phone after I spent the entire day with them at school or whatever. I was always tying up the phone line. Um, so I'm from a generation where we talked on the phone. It was normal to pick up and call people and have those conversations. We're lots of times working with young development officers who never have had a house phone. Um, they never had a busy signal. They didn't even have answering machines. They've always just had voicemail. And I have daughters that are in their 20s, and picking up the phone and talking to people is the most intimidating thing that they can ever think of. So one of the things that I do with my young development officers is I give them a month. I give them a 30-day challenge. And I tell them, for the next 30 days, every conversation that you were going to have via text, turn that into a phone call. And they look at me like I have 10 eyes. Like, you can tell all your friends, tell all your people what you're doing so they know to answer your call, because if not, they're going to be like, oh my gosh, something's wrong. Like, when my daughter calls me now, I automatically think something's wrong because she never calls me. So I'm like, oh my gosh, there's been a car accident, something's wrong, because they text. So preface all, your parents, your friends, your colleagues, hey, I'm not going to text this much. I'm doing this challenge. I'm not going to be texting. I'm going to be picking up the phone. And if you can do that for 30 days, it's going to really help break that the ice of being nervous about picking up and having phone calls with people. There are a reason why, it's important to have habits. So, like, so if you talk to people that are trying to help you develop good habits, or like a AA or something like that, it's like 90 meetings in 90 days, like 30-day increments. If you do something repetitively, it becomes a part of who you are. If you are trying to break a new habit, you have to do it X amount of times before it becomes a habit. It's something that you're comfortable with. Talking on the phone is that same thing. So give yourself a 30-day challenge. Say, I'm not going to have any text conversations. Like, you can little bit, I'm on my way home, those little things, but conversations, I'm not going to have any conversations on text or Snapchat or whatever media you use. I'm just going to pick up the phone and call and talk to people for 30 days. And it really can be life-changing for those people that are intimidated or nervous about picking up the phone.
So before we run out of time here, you mentioned the 80-40-20. Are there any other specific numbers you should look for when you look at a development director, for example, a full-time development staff, or even a part-time development person? What are their numbers? What numbers should they be measuring in a given month, and what should those numbers look like for them to be successful?
Yeah, so the number one thing that we tell people are we cannot control how much money people give. So organizations often will have a budget. Like, you have a goal, you have to bring in X amount of dollars. This is your goal. And that is great. I think we have to have measurable goals. We have to have good monetary metrics in place, because essentially we also know how much money we need to bring in to keep the organization afloat. That's important. But at the end of the day, I can't control how many dollars that people are giving back to my organization. I can only control the amount of times I've asked people for those gifts. And the numbers tell us it's a statistical game. The more people you ask, the more money you're going to bring in, the deeper relationships you're going to build. And so I think it's going to be really important to have the metrics about activity. That's really important. What activity are you doing? So time blocking yourself to make phone calls, time blocking yourself to meet people, vitally important. If you are an organization that works with an executive director or a president or a pastor, you need to have at least one day a month set aside on that person's schedule that you do appointments that day. Now, if you get to that day and their appointments that they don't need to be a part of, that's fine. But we all know that our executive directors, our pastors, our chaplains, they have crazy busy schedules. And it's very hard to come up with these last minute opportunities for them to meet with you. So if you automatically have one day blocked a month that you're going to try to get visits with them, that's going to really help you tremendously going forward. When I was working in ministry still, I had 2 afternoons. I didn't just have one day. I had 2 afternoons that my pastor was willing to do visits with me. And we blocked it out. We set our site at the beginning of the month. Here's where we're going to, try to fill up these meetings. Here are the people that we're going to try to get meetings for. And there's sometimes we didn't make it work, but for the most part, it was really, really helpful having those. So having your time blocked for calls, having your time blocked for appointments by yourself, as well as your executive director, chaplain, pastor, president, vitally important. Doing your 80-40 calls, vitally important. And then the metrics of your numbers are going to speak for himself. So you can really look at that. I think we always want to be increasing. So I think setting some good metrics on, I want to add X amount of people to our mailing list. I want to acquire 5 new donors this month. I want to invite 10 new people to be monthly givers. Anything that helps you increase people into the giving cycle and solidify their place in the giving cycle is going to be a metric you want to set. Every organization is different. Some organizations don't have a monthly giving program. So for you to set a standard of, I'm going to have 10 monthly givers every month is crazy right off the bat because you don't have the basis for that. But to say, I'm going to call 5 new people every month, that's really important. So you have to set some standards, whatever that looks like for your organization, but you need to also reevaluate that probably every 6 to 12 months for organizations that are getting started, and at least every 12 months for organizations with mature programs.
100%. I like to say, if you were to fast forward 5 or 10 years and look back on the success or lack of success at your organization's fundraising, it probably is as simple as saying it would directly correlate with how many people you meet face to face, prospects and donors, every month over that time frame, right? It's as simple as that. So make some calls and go meet people, and good things happen over time. All right. Well, thank you for joining us today, Tara. It was great to get some of your knowledge here. We could talk about this topic for a long time, and I'm sure we will come back to it again in the future.
Yeah, no, it was my pleasure. And remember, the thing that you do today is always better than the thing that didn't happen yesterday. So don't be afraid to not be perfect or put yourself out there. Whatever you do today is going to be better, infinitely better than the thing that didn't happen. And just remember that. Pick up the phone, make the calls, make the appointments, meet the people.
I love it. Thank you, Tara. And before we close up, I have a question for you, Tara. Have you ever been to San Antonio?
I have. In fact, I was just in San Antonio last week, Rhen.
Is there anything in particular you like about San Antonio?
Well, I love the Riverwalk. So the Riverwalk is this beautiful area in downtown historic San Antonio that has fantastic shopping, uh, bars, restaurants, museums, and hotels. So along this area, just beautiful, beautiful scenery, beautiful cedar trees, people walking around, just a great, great place in San Antonio.
It sounds like a great place to hold a conference, if you ask me, which is why we're holding a conference in San Antonio this coming June 24th through 26th, 2024. It will have Raise 24, the Catholic Fundraising Conference, at the Hotel Contessa, right on the Riverwalk. You can walk out of the hotel onto the Riverwalk and enjoy the ambiance and the boats going by and go visit the restaurants and everything else. It's going to be pretty fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a beautiful hotel in historic San Antonio. Literally right outside the back door is the Riverwalk. I live in the Midwest. It's been kind of cold. It's February. We had snow on the ground. It was beautiful, 70 degrees. I walked outside. I heard mariachi bands. I heard music from restaurants. It's just a beautiful, beautiful area, really fun. Beautiful city. I'm so excited to invite our friends and our benefactors of the organization been to San Antonio. I think it's an amazing place for a conference. And on top of just a really fantastic conference, we have great speakers lined up. If you've ever been to a Petrus conference before, you know that we like to have fun. We like to laugh. We're a prayerful group. We play hard, but we pray hard as well. So we hope that you consider joining us this year. I think it's just going to be a fantastic opportunity to come together with other individuals who are working in development. It's a great opportunity to share stories, to encourage each other, and just really build up this community of great development professionals.
Exactly. And it's a good fit for kind of all levels of experience. Last year at Raise 23, I believe we had about the same number of people who are brand new in their first year of fundraising as we did people who had 10 years plus of experience. So it's definitely a mix of all different levels, and it's a great chance to network and to gain some insight from others and hear some great speakers and take your fundraising up to the next level. So we hope you'll join us there. Prices for Raise are set to go up on March 15th. So if you're hearing us before then, go check that out before prices go up, and we'll see
the Ides of March. So you get your registration in before that ominous date.
Exactly. Go to petrusdevelopment.com/raise24 for more information. That's petrusdevelopment.com/raise24. And as I mentioned earlier, if you'd like to download those free scripts for making phone calls to get meetings with donors, go to petrusdevelopment.com/138 to access those scripts. Download them for free. petrusdevelopment.com/138 for episode 138 of the Petrus Development Show. And with that, we'll call it a day. Thank you so much for joining us, Tara. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
This conference is well worth the entire experience, especially for the faithful looking to build the body of Christ. That's what one ministry director said after attending the Petrus Development's Raise conference in 2023. A fundraising staff member from a different organization had this to say: "I have several years of experience fundraising, and I found the conference applicable to me. I also saw new to fundraising people getting a lot out of it too. There is literally something for everyone here." In 2024, Raise, the Catholic Fundraising Conference, will be even bigger and even better. Join us on the Riverwalk in San Antonio, Texas, June 24 through 26, 2024. Raise 24 will feature outstanding speakers, great networking opportunities, and an authentically Catholic conference experience. Registration is open now. Learn more at petrusdevelopment.com/raise24. That's petrusdevelopment.com/raise24.
I'm so glad that you could join us for this episode of the Petrus Development Show. Do you know anybody whose ministry needs to take their fundraising to the next level? Please pass along this show to them. And if you haven't already, take a minute and do 3 things. Subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. If you like the show, give us a 5-star rating and leave us a review. And check out our website, petrusdevelopment.com. Your ministry and the kingdom need good people doing great development work, and your donors receive just as much benefit from giving as your organization does from receiving. And as it says in Luke 5, cast your nets out into the deep. Be bold and the Lord will provide. God bless, and we'll see you next time.